Welcome to the first breakout session here. We have H2Oquirrh, a vision for Salt Lake County's Southwest Waterways. With us today, we have Renn, who is an environmental engineer with LimnoTech, Dylan, who's a project manager with Design Workshop based in Aspen, and then Jason, who is the Canyons Management Program Director with Salt Lake County. So please welcome them.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. This is the discussion on the vision for a Waterways project for the southwest corner of Salt Lake County. We're calling it the H2Oquirrh project. So this is a vision that's connecting the creeks from the Oquirrh Mountain Range down to the Jordan River. My name is Jason Wolf. I'm here with Salt Lake County. I'm working in the Office of Regional Development as the Canyons Management Program Director. Let's see, I'm here with Dylan and Renn, and today we kind of want to talk to you about community engagement and where we're at with this vision. So, as I mentioned, I work in the Regional Development Office, where our mission is to protect, enhance, and promote the ecological, social values of the canyons of Salt Lake County. And this Southwest Waterway vision is part of a TLC project, a Transportation Land Use Connection with WFRC. Just a little bit about the TLC program. It provides assistance to local communities to plan for growth and opportunity within their communities, connecting people through walking, biking, and transit. Part of the discussion, as you can hear as the theme, has been managing our growth here at the conference. So our goal here is to help residents living throughout the area to help enjoy a high quality of life, improving on economic opportunities. As you know, Salt Lake County is growing. 60% of our growth is currently happening in this region. So this is the southwest corner of Salt Lake County. We recognize this, and we know now is the time to start planning and interacting with these communities to look at the vision and future for these waterways. So today we wanted to share with you a little bit of an update on where we're at with the tools for the Southwest Waterway vision and how we can engage with the community. With that said, I'll hand it over and we can give you an update on the project.
Test. All right. Thanks, Jason. As Jason said, I'm Dylan Bagnasco. I'm from Design Workshop, Landscape Architecture and Planning. We're based out of Colorado. We've got offices all over the place, but been doing some more work out here with these communities in the Salt Lake County area and just thrilled to be involved. We came on this name, we bounced around a lot of ideas for this plan, but we think this is kind of a fun name for the Oquirrh Mountain area, H2Oquirrh. I'm going to talk a little bit about existing conditions mapping, our findings and some of the big ideas that we're starting to frame for this vision plan, and then our next steps and how you all can get involved. We are relatively early on in this process, but we thought this would be a great opportunity to engage with folks and get some excitement about this vision plan and hopefully some engagement as we move forward. So maybe this time next year we'll be able to share more about our actual vision plan, but this is just sort of an update for you all. So we started with an existing conditions map review, and I'm just going to quickly show you what that looks like. So this is a story map, GIS maps, that is going to be linked with a public survey, a virtual survey, and we're thinking of this as a virtual creek tour. So if you live in this area or you don't live in this area, you can come jump on this story map, click around, and you can learn about these areas, these sub-basins, the hydrology of these creeks, the land cover, habitat and wildlife, parks and trails, transportation and culture. And then as you're taking the survey, you can be thinking about some of these things in the plan. So that's a valuable tool for us in just establishing a shared understanding of the existing conditions. We took those maps to our steering committee and asked them to think about several big components of this plan. The first was land use and built environment. So you've seen a few of these types of versions of these maps this morning, generally centered around the lake levels. Here you're seeing southwest Salt Lake County. On the bottom left of each image is the Oquirrh Mountain Range, and it may be hard to see there on the screen, but this is sort of our study area, and you can really start to see, if you look at a time lapse, the suburban growth and sprawl of this area with no signs of stopping. We heard this morning from the mayor about 2.2 million more people will call Utah home by 2060, and a lot of that growth is happening here. So sustainable urban planning is our friend here, and we really want to get ahead of some of this. This is our study area, so this is tilted now. North is screen right, and at the top of the map there, that big gray blob is the Kennecott copper mine. We're looking at each of these drainages, these creeks, along this study area, so Beef Hollow, Wood Hollow, Rose Creek, Butterfield, Midas. These names might mean something to some of you in the room. And you can see here about 40% of this area is characterized as urban development already. We've got the next area, that light beige color, is the scrub and shrub lands, which don't get a lot of credit, but they are very important for ecological function, even though they're not as exciting or pretty as old growth forests. Cultivated crops are, as you can see, not much left there in this study area, and only 1% of the study area is characterized as wetland. So we want to think about preservation of open space, and balancing the desire for urban growth with the preservation of green spaces and water resources can be really complex. The careful integration of green infrastructure, like low-impact development practices, will be a huge consideration of this plan and this area of development. Creating livable cities is about access to open space, tree canopy, walkability. As we toured this area, I was struck by the scale and the ubiquity of the kind of development here. It's beautiful, but you have a lot of suburban growth happening with not as much consideration for livability and walkability and transport. Almost 80% of folks in Salt Lake County last year drove to work alone. That's a striking statistic. We're looking at transportation. You can see the micro-transit service areas here, the quarter-mile walk and half-mile walk to transit hubs. I've been bouncing around on the TRAX line the last day or two while I've been here, and you've got a wonderful public transportation system that's expected to expand in this area, which is great news. We're looking at cultural assets. These are schools, places of worship, cultural centers. What's interesting is all of these have a relationship to at least one creek or canal, but maybe they're not embracing them or integrated with those resources as much as they could be. Outdoor recreation and connection to nature is our next big idea. So we want to ensure that the next generation has access to open space. This is not something to take lightly. You know, Utah ranks as the second best state for mountain biking. You guys hike a lot, you bike a lot. We've got a large equestrian community, and so we want to ensure that these spaces are protected and preserved for us and for future generations. You can see here parks, trails, and open spaces, and then around each of those is a walkability blob, and so you can kind of see the connectivity, and some of the gaps exist particularly around those north-south transit corridors. The highways really cut off communities from one another. Utahns, as I said, participate in hiking more than any other activity, but you also have winter activities and other recreational activities that folks like to get into. So diverse recreation opportunity is important, not just for equitability, but this is a huge economic driver for this area. We want these recreation opportunities to be connected to waterways, and currently that exists, but we think there's opportunity for improvement. Your outdoor recreation economy is growing and attracting quite a few visitors. And then natural systems. We're thinking about environmental protection, not just about creating pretty places, but about the ecosystem functions of these places and cleaning our air and our water as we set aside these functioning ecosystems. This study area contains several charismatic species of note that I've included here on this map, but as we know, these animals need space. I'm from Texas. We don't have any quail left. They're all gone from habitat loss. And so looking at, you've got California quail, turkey, mule deer, ruffed grouse, some amazing wildlife resources in this area, and what they need is space and connectivity. And ecosystem services are another really important part of these spaces. As I said, we want to make sure that these places are functioning ecologically, and utilizing such things as low-impact development practices can really help this. I've included a case study here on the bottom left about a Seattle low-impact development project that was able to decrease stormwater discharge by between 48 and 74%. And of course, resource conservation in the face of climate change is a massive part of these efforts. I want to make sure that I move quickly here to give Renn some time. So here's our study area. Here's the hydrology. You're seeing the various sub-watershed basins and creeks draining to the Jordan River and ultimately the Great Salt Lake. And I'm going to pass it over to Renn from LimnoTech to talk about water resources.
Yeah, I'm Renn Lambert from LimnoTech in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You might ask why a person from Michigan's here. I grew up in Utah, and I'm involved with a couple of projects here in Utah. And I'm excited to be working on this project because I grew up in Riverton, and I've been learning that I walked by and saw these creeks all the time growing up, and I didn't even know they were there. So something that, yeah, you never know what you're running into later in life, I guess. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the hydrology and stormwater issues in these streams, some challenges that the streams face, and opportunities that we have to maybe shape and utilize these waterways in the future as the county develops. There's many opportunities to enhance the water-centered natural amenities. Streams capture a variety of flows, and the opportunities are diverse. One of the challenges is that there isn't a lot of water in these streams. They're intermittent, ephemeral streams. They don't flow all the time. So there might be opportunities to create amenity moments, little places where there's water maybe, but not have water in the stream all the time everywhere. So that's something that we could consider as we develop and want to utilize these waterways. One of the challenges is that most of the precipitation comes in the winter in the form of snow. From the data that I've seen so far, some of these streams don't flow for years. I think most of the water is absorbed into the groundwater before it even makes it out of the mountains. So I've been reading some of the reports, and up until the 1990s, some of these streams were just completely filled in and didn't even exist anymore. And when the county started developing more 30 years ago, they realized, oh, I guess we do need these streams to drain the stormwater out of here. So they started restoring them. I don't know if I call it restoring them or just kind of bringing them back into existence. They didn't really look supernatural or nice, but they exist again. And now we have opportunities to maybe do a little more with what they started with 30 years ago. This is a hydrograph, not really a hydrograph, but more average of the discharge data that was collected at Butterfield Creek between 1999 and 2016. And this was near the mouth of the canyon. And most of the water comes in the springtime when the snow's melting. And it looked like at that point there is a little bit of base flow in the creek. I don't know if most of it goes into the ground after this point. But from what I've heard, a lot of these streams are dry in the valley most of the time. So yeah, there is water. You might want to capture the water or utilize the water that's in the ground, but there might not be a lot at the surface. And some other challenges besides just the dryness of the streams is when you develop land, more water runs off, but it's a poorer quality. So you will get more water potentially into the streams, hence the county restoring the stream channels. But the water is usually poor quality. And then another challenge is, like I mentioned before, there's periods where there are runoff, and then there's other periods where there's no runoff, and there's no water in the stream. You might not be able to do water-based recreation if you have a dry channel. And in this part of the valley, there isn't really substantial surface storage. There isn't like a Deer Creek reservoir or some other reservoir where you could capture the water that comes in the springtime and then send it down through the streams through the year. That water doesn't exist. And then there can be flood risks during spring runoff, and that's why the county has worked on restoring the channels. I know there's issues with the streams and flooding, but that's a challenge that continues to exist and needs to be addressed through in the future. One of the opportunities or solutions is just to develop LID. I've been working on another study. Some of the benefits of LID is that it could be a lower cost to implement LID if over other traditional stormwater infrastructure, and it mimics the natural condition. Before LID is implemented, the hydrograph might look more like this lower hydrograph. And then without LID, you'd get a bigger peak and more flow in the stream. But when you implement LID, it restores it back to the more natural state. LID, the main purpose of it is to put the water in the ground. And water could take up to 50 years to get to the Great Salt Lake in the ground. On the surface, it could take, a few days. But then it's in the Great Salt Lake and it will evaporate quickly. So if you can get it in the ground, it'll treat it. A lot of it will eventually get to the Great Salt Lake, or it will be in the ground for a long time, so you could pull it out and use it for those water amenities. If you wanted a wetland or some other thing, you could pull some water out of the ground. And it's a lot cheaper than like irrigating grass or waterways. It's a lot more water friendly. You won't use as much water for a water amenity than growing grass or something like that. Yeah, so these are some other ideas we had for, using the water that we have, maybe creating amenities through water reuse. One thing we noticed when we were going through the data is that most of the wastewater treatment plants are down at the bottom of the valley, and there's lots of development up at the top. So maybe if those plants could be decentralized, moved up further, then some of that water could be used for base flow in the streams or wetlands or replenishing the groundwater. We know that the water does go in the ground, as I mentioned earlier, so if you can get the water up higher, put it in the ground, then it could be available for people to use through the years. If you slow it down, rather than sending it all down in a sewer system to a wastewater plant and then straight to the Jordan River. So that could be one way to keep the water there. Another idea we had was just implementing more check dams in the places where the streams do flow, slowing the water down, or someone was mentioning beaver dam analogs, slowing down the water, spreading it out, getting into the ground. It's also an opportunity. And then, meandering, slowing down the water. I think this is an example of the Provo River up between Jordanelle and Deer Creek. They do channelize the water, make it meander more, slow it down, created habitat. And when you slow it down, it can help recharge the groundwater more too. So. And this was from our site tour a few weeks ago. My colleague Steve went there with Dylan, and I've seen a lot of pictures in my review of the reports from these streams. This is kind of what a lot of them look like right now. So it looks like a stream that doesn't flow often, doesn't have a lot of love or attention, and maybe we could do a little more with that, at least in portions of these streams. I don't know if we could keep them all wet all the time, but thinking about ways to utilize them more as a public amenity, and also helping to manage the water a little better. And then I think this was in Harriman or Daybreak, but this example of maybe I probably wouldn't do this, but that's one way to have the water at the surface and people to enjoy. But something to think about, the contrast between these and what can we do better than what is out there right now. So we've started thinking about, what are the opportunities and what things could we do to restore and revitalize these streams. We could route stormwater to natural treatment or LID. find ways to restore the stream channels, cross veins, check dams, ways to slow down the water, have it be there a little longer, put it in the ground where it could be utilized for later, or at least create habitat downstream when the water comes back up out of the ground. And then, yeah, we were wondering about diverting or treating the treated effluent for reuse. I know a bunch of the canals go by these streams. A lot of the canals have overflow structures. Maybe if the wastewater plants could put some water in the canals and then it could go into the streams, or if the streams could get their own water rights to have a little bit of base flow, some of the canal water could be diverted into the streams. The canals right now are used for stormwater, but maybe they could be used for enhancing natural systems as well. And then, yeah, helping maintain natural flow post-development with the implementation of LID could be important too. So, you want to talk about next steps, Dylan?
Yeah, so as we said, just wanted to provide a preview of what we're thinking about, where we're headed with this vision plan, and invite you all to engage with it. Ideally, we're here wrapping up our existing conditions review, and then we're going to open it up to an engagement window. So we're going to send out those story maps, the GIS maps, and a virtual public survey to really start to understand how people are using these creeks, what's the public sentiment, what do people want to see happen. We're going to go back to our steering committee and our focus groups and start to look at big ideas and goals, then go back to the community again to synthesize and prioritize the things that we really should be focusing on. And then we'll start to draft the vision plan and think about how these projects could get implemented and funded over time. These are big, ambitious ideas that we're moving toward. I think Renn talked about that difference between, we want to get water to the Salt Lake, but if we're thinking for the future and future generations, maybe it's best to put it in the ground and allow it to infiltrate, and in 50 years it'll be in the Salt Lake in a much more sustainable way, not evaporating. So we are trying to think about holistically systems thinking for this vision plan, and look forward to sharing more with you, and hopefully some of you guys can take the survey and get involved. Thank you.
Minutes for questions.
Does anyone have any questions? We'll hand the mic to anyone who has a question.
I'm just curious about how this would all interface with the cities in those areas, because it just seems you might have these grand ideas, but how do you get through the zoning? So all these riparian corridors, if they're zoned for development, how are you going to implement what you're doing? Because all I see down there is churning out high-density developments like nothing. I mean, they're approving building permits like crazy down there.
Yeah.
So how would this all work with the zoning?
That's a great question. Luckily we're partnering with these communities in this vision plan. So on our steering committee and our various focus groups, members of those municipalities are all involved. And we are asking these tough questions. We haven't gotten to a point where we're making any sort of recommendations around land use and zoning, but it's fair game for this plan to say, hey, maybe you need to think about revising your land use code as you spread here, because this isn't working. The scale and ubiquity of this kind of development is not sustainable. So, I think that will be a part of the vision plan. We will be thinking about zoning and land use. Good. Oh, lots of questions.
Hi, so along Rose Creek, they have an issue with horse and cattle manure coming down the creek and causing E. coli issues further down. Would things like beaver dam analogs further up along the creek help along there, and how do we go about actually implementing that?
I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to natural systems being able to solve these problems, but I think we will be engaging with ecologists. I just found out about that issue on our site tour, actually, the E. coli issue. And I think things like our recommendations might include larger stream setbacks for those type of properties, potentially beaver dam analogs and other sort of riparian edge conditions that can filter that, that effluent. But I don't think we've gotten to that level of specificity yet, to be frank.
Like to speak over it.
Oh, no, we're recording, so there you go.
You spoke earlier of opportunities. Salt Lake County needs a whitewater park. The terrain on the east side, Cottonwoods, Parleys, afford that. We also have it in Butterfield. In your scheduling of plans, consider a whitewater park with recirculating water as a recreation amenity. It's very much needed in this county. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. We hadn't heard that yet. LimnoTech has been really encouraging us to think bigger about water resources, including recirculating treated wastewater. And it's something that people are maybe a little uncomfortable with, but the fact is that water is cleaner than what it was before it went into the plant. So I think I don't know, do you want to talk about that and about whitewater wastewater park?
This is upstream.
Upstream.
This is a whitewater recirculating park
Okay.
for recreation.
I think there's opportunities on the Jordan River too.
We need a gradient.
Yeah, there is a gradient between Utah Lake and about right here, and I think people don't see that. But we designed a paddleboard course, a rough design for it a couple of years ago, 2019, and the county got it. I know the county mayor liked it. But I think there's opportunities for things like that all over the place.
Talking about class 1, class 3 water.
Yeah, I don't know where that could be implemented, but I think there's a lot of places. This isn't a very flat area, but yeah, it could be considered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of to dovetail his, when you're working with the cities and communities on these ecological standpoints and enhancing the watersheds, are you also looking at them for, how they might be the linear parks for that part of the town?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think that kind of fits into our outdoor recreation idea for this, or tenet for this plan. We would really love to see spaces that are connected, livable, beautiful, and functional. And so how can we take those opportunities to bring water to the surface, allow people to interact with it, allow it to serve an ecological function, and be a very visible, sustainable resource? I think that would be the dream for some of these spaces. And linear parks are probably a huge part of that, along the canals and waterways, north, south, and east, west.
Got about time for maybe 2 or 3 more.
Mine should be quick. You mentioned the survey. How is that getting disseminated? Is that going to be through the communities, or how is that? And then on second quick question is there going to be a public outreach component to this? So once you come up and maybe develop the plan, is there going to be a public outreach? Because you mentioned, you didn't even know creeks existed in these areas. So I think, enhancing and highlighting some of these tributaries in our area would be very beneficial.
Yeah, great point. The first part of that, the survey will be disseminated through our community partners. We're hoping that we can come up with a comprehensive and wide-reaching way of doing that with some of the county communications folks. But we're working with West Jordan and Harriman and these communities. So we'll go out through a variety of channels. And then, yes, we will have a public outreach component to share some of the big ideas, but we are realizing as we get more into this that might be more of a public education effort than an actually getting feedback. I recently did an open space project in Colorado where we went to ask people questions about this place and none of them knew about it. And I was like, okay, well, here's what we're doing. So, yeah.
Got 2 more here.
Hi, my name is Tish Broker. I'm on the City Council in Riverton.
Great.
So this is new information actually to me, but I wanted to respond to that question about how do you get cities involved. I think what residents need to do on a regular basis, not just one time, is they need to show up at City Council and say, you know what really matters to me? What really matters to me is trails along our creeks and riverbeds, because it's really easy to only focus on what you hear about. And so I think that would help. I think you have to have that long-term vision. We made a mistake in Riverton. We're going to be expanding Bagnasco on 13400, and we failed to consider that Rose Creek goes right under that river, goes right under the road there. And so we're not doing anything to enhance what we could have at the time. We could have created some kind of an enhancement for Rose Creek. So it's not an impossible task. You just have to stay focused on it. You have to make sure it's a priority in your city. As far as the zoning, I think your developers are actually quite interested in doing this sort of thing because this is what residents want. They want to live by trails and they want to live by parks. So they're willing to invest, in my opinion.
Yeah, we looked at, thank you. We went and looked at the community of Daybreak to look at some of the successful parts of that community, and we think there's an economic component to all of this, as you said. We want to make sure that it makes sense from an economic point of view.
What are your, what are your current considerations for contamination from surrounding industries?
I can't say that we have looked at any, well, Renn, have you looked at any data on the contamination?
Let's see. We don't stand close to each other. I have looked at the water quality issues. Most of it is E. coli. I know there's some residual issues from mining in the past. I know that water quality and the state have tried to mitigate those, and they're still working on mitigating the E. coli issue. I think the biggest thing with the development is implementing the stormwater water quality controls, and if you can do that on site, I think that would be the most important thing, and the cheapest. So I think there are some issues that people are working on addressing. There will be issues in the future unless we implement water quality controls and are careful with what we do when we develop. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that comes back probably to some of the land use and zoning considerations. We want to make sure that if folks are developing this land, that they're doing it responsibly and implementing the kind of infrastructure that would avoid additional contamination.
We'll go last one here in the back and then wrap it up.
Do I just speak? Yes, I just speak. So Salt Lake City has a riparian corridor ordinance and has had that ordinance in place for many years. I see a head nod up there at the podium, so you all are aware of that. It was extremely influential in protecting Allen Park. It slowed down the development of Allen Park because the zoning was a multifamily zone with a 35-foot height restriction, and the setbacks required by the riparian corridor ordinance actually gave the developer pause, and Mayor Mendenhall stepped in with $7 million something and purchased the park for Salt Lake City.
Wonderful. That ordinance has been mentioned before, but I hadn't heard that example, so thank you for sharing that.
Well, that's all the time we have, but I'm sure you could reach out to the three of these speakers if you have more questions or comments.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for coming to this first breakout session. I think there's portobello mushrooms upstairs, so enjoy.